saya bicara pagi ini. Tapi saya minta maaf, saya tidak dapat banyak waktu untuk siap. Pada waktu Pastor Agus salam email kepada saya, kami kerja di Papua New Guinea. Sibuk sekali di Papua New Guinea juga. Ini menyebabkan hanya 2 hari saya siap untuk memberi pidato ini. Tapi saya coba, sebenarnya saya sudah lebih baik masuk ini dalam satu PowerPoint, but I didn't get the opportunity to finish it off, so we'll have to do what we can. All right, you might ask, how am I qualified to talk about parenting? If you look at the profile, you say, well, it's nice that you worked in Irian Jaya and West Papua and Papua New Guinea and was a pastor, but does he have children? Does he have grandchildren? Is he qualified to speak about children? So I didn't put that in his resume, but you may know that we have 5 children, 4 are married, and we have 17 grandchildren. Our children are between the ages of, 32 to 43, and our grandchildren are from, 2 years old till 17-year-old. So we're dealing with different levels of grandparenting as well. It's a little bit different when you talk to a 2-year-old than when you talk to a 17-year-old. And it's an interesting stage of life. All right, so that, I guess it qualifies me a little bit to talk about it, I suppose. Also, as a pastor, having dealt with many situations in the congregation in counseling work as well. And hopefully we can share some of the experiences and what we've learned, not only from the studies, but also from the practice. All right, parenting is quite a challenge. And all of us who have parents, have children, who understand that it's not easy. And we understand that why? Because we are sinners, and we don't always see things right. And we bring forth children who are also sinners. And it's like leading the blind sometimes. Sometimes you throw your hands up in the air and says, how do I deal with this one? Right? And it's not always easy parenting. But the Lord doesn't leave us in the dark. He does give us directions in the scriptures and also the communion of saints to help one another. If parenting is already a challenge, then cross-cultural parenting is sometimes even more difficult. And this is what you're undoubtedly experiencing. And I can sympathize with you somewhat, because we had to do that too. Because having spent 20 years in Indonesia, all our children were, only the first one was born here in Canada. And he was only 1 year old when we went to Papua, to the bush. But all the rest of our children were born and raised in Papua. It wasn't until our oldest one, I think she was 17 years old, by the time we came back here. And so what we have is not Indonesian children, we don't have Canadian children, we have what we call third culture children. And so we had to bring them up in this culture, which was not their culture. And so in somewhat I can sympathize with you people when you come from an Indonesian culture and have to adapt yourselves into this Canadian culture, and not just yourselves, but particularly your children and your teenage children, your young adults, and it is a challenge. From some personal experience, so I can understand also what some of the things you might be going through is, some of the things we struggle with is, one of the big things we struggle with is immorality. Coming from Indonesian culture, we felt that we were very protected in Indonesia because it was a Muslim country. And so you didn't have a filthy book in every street corner or a bad movie in every store, right? We were very protected. You understand that too in Indonesia. You didn't see those things so public as we do here, right? And so we were very protected. All of a sudden, our children come into this society, and our youngest was only 9, the next one was 16, and so they're all teens, so they're in that stage of their hormones running and, trying to find who they are, and you're coming into a very immoral culture. That was quite a struggle to deal with them in that situation. So I can sympathize with you when you also have that struggle with your children and grandchildren and young adults. The other thing we struggle with is that in Indonesia, we experience that people talk to each other. We come to this culture and people don't talk. For example, our oldest daughter was going to university in York University, and she was on the bus, And she was always talking to people. Someone finally came up to her and said to her, and says, "You're not from Canada, are you?" And she says, "No." I said, I was born in Indonesia. I said, "How do you know?" She says, "Because you talk to people." You know, and that could be a problem too. Because when she talks to boys, the boys think, "Oh, she must be interested in me." Right? And so we had to help her through that and say, be careful who you talk to. You know, because just because you're talking to somebody doesn't mean that you shouldn't give them the idea that you're interested in them. And the third thing is that people just don't understand. And I think some of your children who were born and raised in Indonesia that come here fairly recently, you have each other. That's a good thing. But when our children came here, they were third culture kids. They couldn't tell their story. And people thought they were weird stories because it didn't happen to them. It happened over there, but it didn't happen here. And so until you were here in this culture for a time and you build the stories with the people who you're related to, you're finally connected. And so it made a very lonely life. And so I can imagine that some of your people might have a bit of a sense of loneliness in that way too, but you do find comfort in each other. You have a larger group, and so you can encourage one another that way too. But this is some of the personal experiences we had coming from a third culture, so to speak, into the Canadian culture. But as we go into parenting, there's a few texts that I like to address. And one text might surprise you a little bit, but I do want to put heavy emphasis on it. Because as we deal with teenagers and young adults, we need to start earlier. Because you can only deal with your teenagers and young adults if you have not dealt with them earlier, you're going to have big troubles afterwards. All right? And so let's have a look at the first text I want to look at is Proverbs 22, verse 6. And Proverbs 22, verse 6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it." I'm sure we've met this text before. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. That's a difficult text. That's a hard text. Especially when you have teenagers and young adults who are wayward, who are drifting. And you say, what did I do wrong? I had one sister in the congregation come up to me and says, "This text is not right. This is not right. Because we brought up our children the best as we could, but look where they are today." It says, and I said, "This is the word of God. It is right. Maybe we need to examine ourselves. Maybe we did something wrong here." And the point here is that when did you raise up your children? When did you train up your child? Did you train up your child when he was in a high school or when he was in a high chair? It's very important. It's very important that you realize, and maybe for some of you it comes a bit too late, but it's never too late. So I also said to this parent too, it says, when did you bring up your child? When did you raise up your child? When did you start to speak to your children about the things of God and moral living and ethical life? Okay? A lot of people think, well, the kids don't understand yet when they don't go to school yet, and even when they start going to school, they don't understand. And so they wait till they're almost teenagers before they start talking to them. That is way too late. You know Hitler had it right? You know what Hitler said? Give me your children for the first 6 years, and you can have them back. Because he understood that the moral quality is laid on the heart of a child in the first 6 years. Augustine said the same thing. Teach a child in the first 6 years, and they will be all right. You know, the Lord had it right too. Why did the Lord have Moses trained in the home of his father and mother? Moses never left from it. Why? Because the first 3 or 4 years he was under the influence of his parents. And it never left him. Yeah. So if you need to take, and if this is something, if you've been a little bit too late for yourself and you're raising your children, tell your children to raise your grandchildren from day one, when they're in a high chair. Because that will not leave them when they go through difficult times. Every child will go through difficult times. Some more, some less. But when you've laid the moral qualities, scripture principles on the heart of the child, of course, age appropriate, right? When you start young, it will never leave them. And I've seen some of our best elders who have gone through difficult times. They've left the church and they've come back and they've become the best elders because, why did they come back? Because the moral quality was laid on their hearts when they were young. The parents did a job. Now, there's no guarantee that it's always going to work out, right? And we're all covenant children of the Lord, right? We have a relationship with the Lord, but not all covenant children are elect children, right? And so even among our own children, there may be those who will be lost. And this is something hard for us to accept. But we also must live in the promise of God, who says that the Lord will bless the generations who are faithful in Him. So if we're faithful in our preaching and our teaching of our children, and setting godly example, the Lord will bless. And those who will definitely remain wayward will be few and far between. The Lord blesses the generations who are faithful to Him. That's a sure promise of God that we may live in. Okay, so it says, train up a child. Okay, train up. That training has two aspects to it. Right? And another text will speak to that. It's not only teaching, but foremost giving godly example. And believe me, your children will learn more by how you walk than how you talk. You can talk all you want, but if your walk doesn't match your talk, you might as well not even talk. And children will follow you more by what you do than what you say. Your saying is important. Don't diminish it. But your walk is of utmost importance. They follow that much more. Okay, train up a child, right? There again, you see a child is a little one, right? It's not an adult or a teenager, it's a little one. But in some ways, we're always a child, aren't we? I still feel like a child too in many ways. You're still learning, right? You still make mistakes, right? And so the point here is humility, right? The Lord says, give me a little child, right? We need to have humble hearts. Always be prepared to be trained and to learn. And even when he's old, he will not depart from it. There's no guarantee that they always will come back, but the promises of the Lord are sure. Okay, the other text I'd like to speak about is Ephesians 6, verse 4. Ephesians 6, verse 4. It comes right after the instruction of the Lord to children. The children are to obey their parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. And then you have, interesting, the fathers are addressed. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Fathers. Why fathers? Why not mothers? Why not fathers and mothers? But when you say fathers, you're including mothers. Because father is the head of the household. Fathers raise their children. They're ultimately responsible. They have to answer to the Lord in the first place. The mothers too, but under the headship of the father. Okay? And the fathers sometimes also ask the mothers to help. Fathers, together with the mothers, raise their children. Right? But the fathers have a big impact on the children. Mothers do too. In fact, in some ways, mothers have a greater impact on the children because they're most often with them many more hours of the day than the fathers are. Right? But it's a different relationship, and more of a compassionate, gentle relationship. The fathers are the ones who sets the rules, who sets the direction of the family. And the fathers are responsible. Okay? And it's interesting, why does the Lord say, do not provoke? Another text will say, do not exasperate your children. Obviously, the Lord says that's because that's what fathers do too often. We try to be macho, tough, right? Disciplinarian, right? Authoritarian, right? And this is exactly what the Lord doesn't want us to do. He says, don't provoke your children. Don't exasperate your children. Now, what is exasperation? One of my sons came to me one day and he says, Dad, don't exasperate me. And I says, you understand the word exasperation? What it really means? He says, what he didn't want, what he was saying, he didn't want to do what I asked him to do, but it was a good thing. What I was asking him to do was a good thing. Exasperation is asking something of someone what he can't do. If I have a lame child and I ask him to jump over a creek, I'm exasperated because I'm asking him to do something he can't do. That's exasperation. But to ask someone to do something what he should be doing is not exasperation, right? So sometimes you need to train your children what exasperation is as well. But the point here is do not provoke. Okay? Don't needle your children. Don't push their buttons when you know that they can't handle a certain situation. Be gentle with them. Okay? Don't provoke your children to anger. The way fathers raise their children, children need to see the gentleness and compassion of the father as much as they see in the mother. So often fathers tend to be tough with their kids. And you can be tough, but you can be tough in a gentle way. Right? If you are going to be violent with your children, you will breed violence. Right? If you raise your children with gentleness, the children will also be gentle. Right? Violence breeds violence. And so this is what it says here. Don't exasperate or provoke your children to anger, because you will get the same result that you're putting into it. But bring them up in the discipline and the structure of the Lord. Bring them up. You know, when we come back in furlough sometimes and we see our kids playing hockey, and I'm sitting on the bleachers and watching some other parents seeing their children play, and I shake my head. Says, they're just hammering at those kids. Can't you do better? And they're really not bringing them up. They're pushing them down. He says, you should be able to do better. Hit them hard and all this kind of stuff. And I said, that's not bringing them up, right? Sure, your children are going to fail, but encourage them, bring them up. He said, that's okay. You can do better. You'll get better next time. Just keep practicing. You need to bring them up, right? But so quickly do we tear people down and tear our children down because we expect more from them. We have to remember they're yet children, right? And it'll come. Just give them time. And in discipline and instruction of the Lord. Instruction is clear, of course, we need to teach, right? No parent can say, I can't teach my children. I'm not a minister. I'm not an elder. No. If you have professed the faith, you can teach. You know sufficiently what the Bible is all about. You can lay that on the heart of your children too. You don't have to be professors to teach your children. Right? What you know of the Lord, pass it on to the next generation. And discipline, what's discipline? Discipline is teaching with some teeth. Sometimes you have to give a little bit of force to it, right? Discipline needs to be age appropriate, of course, right? With children, you may be able to tick them over the fingers a little bit, but you don't slap a teenager. There are different ways of discipline. Discipline means that it's teaching with a hurt. For example, my son, my second son, he loves basketball, and he was good at it. And we enjoyed watching him playing. Right? And but he had a big mouth to my wife, his mother. And I said, Jason, if you do this again, I says, you're not allowed to go to basketball. I hurt myself a little because I enjoyed watching him play. But I said, look, if you have big mouth mom again, it says, you're not going to go to basketball. And he had a big mouth, so he didn't go to basketball, right? But he changed quickly afterwards because he loved basketball so much. That's discipline with some teeth. So you can discipline without physically dealing with it. You need to deal with something they like, take that away from them. That will help them to think it through and take your instruction and your direction seriously. Okay, you probably heard this before, just an overall picture of parenting and grandparenting. There's, of course, 3 ways of parenting, right? You have the authoritarian way, and that means do this or else. In my generation, my parents brought us up that way, do this or else. In fact, one of the congregations I was serving in, I was constantly told us that it's always been done this way. So just simply do it, because it's always been done this way. I say, you bring up your child that way, you will lose them. Especially in this day and age. We need to be authoritative. Authoritative. That means you need to do it this way, but give the reason why. So they do it because of the reason why. They make it their own. They don't do it just because you tell them to do so, but because they understand the reason why, and it's not because you want it, but because it's the Lord who requires it of us. And that is very important in parenting. From very young, even when you're a little child, a child needs to know that they don't do it because you're telling them, that they need to know that you need to instruct them in this because the Lord requires you to instruct them in this. They need to hear the Lord speaking to them through you, and not just you. Right? You need to protect yourself from that, right? Parents often, it's a struggle of will. You do this or else, right? But you need to say to your child, the Lord requires me to tell you this, right? And they need to deal with the Lord in this matter, not deal with you in the first place. It's not a power struggle between you and the child. It needs to be a power struggle between them and what the Lord requires of them. And it's very helpful for the child. The sooner a child can realize that it's the Lord is instructing them through their church, through their parents, that will help them come to grips with their daily life. So you have authoritarian, you have authoritative, and the third one, of course, is permissive. And that's the world today will teach you that quite quickly. It says, don't damage the character of your child. Just let him develop in his own way, and give him freedom. Let him find out himself how he should live his life. And that is, of course, very destructive. That's the flip side of authoritarian. Some people say, well, we shouldn't demand of our children do this or else. They flip over to being permissive, and they just let the child do what they want. And then you get the opposite effect, right? You get the same effect, but from the opposite angle, right? The authoritative is the way we need to bring up our children. We need to instruct them. The Lord requires us to instruct them, but give them the reason why, so that the moral qualities, the moral understanding is laid on the heart of the child, so that they can deal with it. Right, as we deal with teenagers, the life of a teenager, those who have teenagers, they are notoriously moody, right? One moment they can be joyous, and the next moment they can cry, and you can't understand it, right? Teenagers tend to be quite moody, but they come by it very honestly. It's not what they want to do. They struggle with it themselves. They don't want to be miserable. They just feel miserable, right? And then one moment they feel joyous, the next moment they flip over and they're miserable. And they struggle with it. They come by it honestly because their life is changing. It's not only because there are hormonal changes, but they're also starting to realize they're moving out of being a child, and they realize that sooner or later they're going to have to be on their own. They're going to have to jump out of the nest. And they're struggling with how to do this. They're struggling to become mature, and they're not sure how to go about it. And so they're struggling with skills that they need to develop. They're struggling with responsibilities all of a sudden that's laid upon them in the home and in the school. And so as they're going through this bodily changes and peer pressure is becoming important, and there's a surge of independence, you get all kinds of different behaviors that sometimes are very, very conflicting. For example, you can get this passive-aggressive behavior, and sometimes you ask a child to do something, and he says, I'll do it in a minute. And you say, well, you're just sitting there, why can't you do it right now, right? And sometimes it might irritate you and say, but you need to give the child time, right? When you would say, I'll do it in a minute, right? What you need to say to your child, if you want the child to throw out the garbage, then don't tell them to do it right now, because you will start a challenge of wills, right? Teenagers will do that. Because with a teenager, they don't mind obeying you, but they want to obey you on their own terms. Not because you said it, but because they made the decision to obey you. So if you want them to do something, let them know what you want them to do, but give them time to make that decision for themselves. That's part of them growing up, to taking ownership of themselves. So if I want my child to throw out the garbage, I'm not going to tell them to throw out the garbage today. Throw out the garbage right now. No, I'll say, throw out the garbage before supper, please. Right? And they'll do it. They'll make the decision at a certain point to throw out the garbage. Or if we're having supper and the head dentist, you have to throw out the garbage, could you please do it? And they'll do it, right? They need to make that decision, right? So don't force immediate action on your child, on your teenager, because they don't want to make that decision. They don't want to do it because you tell them. They want to do it because they decided to do it, all right? Another behavior that they struggle with is they become very self-conscious, right? You're talking to them, you're looking at them, and all of a sudden at a certain point they say, what are you looking at? Yeah, because they're very conscious of how they look. You know, they want to fit in with the peers, they want to look good. You know, and all of a sudden and you have no intention of judging their appearance or their hair or their clothes or whatever. All of a sudden you get this comment, what are you looking at? You know, so you get this strange reaction sometimes. Another behavior is self-doubt. Okay? They think they can't do anything good. They compare themselves to peers or to others, and they say, I'm not good at it. And they're very critical of themselves, overly critical. The flip side is, and sometimes boys have more trouble with that, they feel like manchos. And so you get things, they do things and they say, well, I thought I could do it. When if it's estimate themselves. And you find that teens will struggle with this, particularly in high school and in colleges, because that's the area where the time of year, the time of their life that they're struggling with the future. They realize that their life is moving on and they need to get ready for it, right? And so skill development is being accelerated, and they're perfecting their talents. I think they want to be the best, okay? And the social skills is being sharpened. They want to fit in with the group. And so usually you find during the teen years, the children, they're very struggling with themselves, they're very moody. Now, as I was preparing for this, I said, well, let me do a little bit of a study on this, and I went on the internet and I did a reality check. You know, and I was very surprised, and maybe you'll be surprised with it too, that the teens or the young adults are the loneliest generation in America. I was quite surprised. I mean, I know they're struggling. You know, we've had teens too, I know they're struggling. But it is, after research done, the young adults, the teens, are the loneliest generation in society. Even lonelier than widows and widowers. And they're struggling, no doubt. Yeah. But I think the facts also speak for themselves. Suicide rate. Do you ever hear of suicide among widows and widowers? Very few. How many suicides do we have of young people, teenagers, college students? Usually on January, February, after a dark period, a lot less sunlight, they struggle mostly, right? And so it's clear that the young adults are the loneliest generation. And you know what? The cell phone, the smartphones hasn't helped it. It has even made them more lonely. Because there's a difference between loneliness and being alone. You can be alone and not feel lonely. And you can be in a crowd and feel quite lonely, right? Cell phones has made young people more lonely. How many young people do you see posting things on the internet, and they're forever checking to see how many people are responding to it? Because they want to see how well they're relating to other people. If they're only getting 10, oh, they feel bad. If they're getting 100, wow, people really like me, right? They're lonely, they're struggling for a relationship. They're struggling for acceptance. So how do we as parents deal with these teens? Well, this might also come as a surprise to you. How do you deal with teens? I'm going to say this goes back to marriage counseling, really. You can only be as good a parent as you're a husband and wife. It starts with you as husband and wife. Believe me, it makes a big, big difference. If you as husband and wife don't get along, if you're living like hotel style, so to speak, you're both going to work and coming home and late in the evening and having a quick meal and go to bed, and tomorrow morning you're gone again, and not connecting with your kids. In fact, you're squabbling a little bit because you're both tired and busy, right? That's going to affect your teens. Teenage insecurity, teenage rebellion is often very much affected, not always caused, but sometimes caused also by mom and dad not having a good marriage, not being connected, right? Are you familiar with Gary and Anna Marie Essel, Going Against God's Way? Have you ever heard of that program? It's an excellent parenting program. We met Gary and Anna Marie Essel in West Papua just before we repatriated in 1995. And we spoke with them personally, and they showed us the videos. Actually, I taught that course 2 times in Toronto. It was really helped people a lot. And one of the things one theory he told us, and I thought it was very helpful, is what he calls couch time. He said they have small groups, usually about 10 people in their counseling sessions. He says one day they had this group, and this one man came to them. He says, you know, I have this problem. I have a child who always hops in bed with us. And we're just getting tired. This child is now 3 or so years old, and every night she comes in bed with us. She gets in bed and sleeps between my wife and myself, and we went to the doctors, we went to psychologists and psychiatrists, and nothing seemed to help. And Gary Essel says, I think I know the answer, the solution to your problem. Couch time. He says, do this tomorrow. When you come home from work, your little girl is going to come up to you and get your attention. You say to your little girl, just wait. Let me sit down on the couch with your mother first, and we'll talk, and then we'll talk to you afterwards. So he did that. He thought it was ridiculous. It's not going to work. But he went home and he talked to his wife, and actually they were at the session together. He talked about it. He said, well, let's try it anyways. We can't lose anything. We tried everything else. Nothing worked. So the following day he came home from work, and sure enough, the little girl comes up to him, Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. And he said to the little girl, said, just wait. Your mom first. So he sat down on the couch and he talked things out for the day. And then after he finished, and then she went to the little girl. That little girl didn't go to bed with them that night. They were amazed. So the following day did the same thing. Didn't go in bed with them. So they said, the third day, he said, okay, let's now give a good little girl attention and not to have couch time. The girl went back in bed. You know why? Because mom and dad are together in bed. There the child feels, hey, mom and dad are one. They're united. That gives security to the child, to see mom and dad are connected, right? And you can only be as good a parent as your husband and wife. If the child knows mom and dad love each other, they're connected, they're one in the decisions and discussions, and they're happy, that will give security to your child. As little as they are, it means a lot to them. These little children are like they're radar, right? They home in, they understand you quite well, more than you think. So when mom and dad are fighting each other and yelling at each other and not having time for each other, the kids become rebellious. Even a little child will become rebellious, right? Because they're insecure. They're not happy. But if mom and dad are getting along and they love one another, and the little child is at peace, right? It's very important, very young, when the children are young, to show that you are united in your marriage. Right? So not only laying the principles of the Lord on their young hearts, but also that you're united in this, that you love one another. Second thing, how can parents help their teens? By loving them. You think that little children need love, right? They do. But the love that little children need, it's only like this. They're hurting a little bit, they come to you and they hold on to your leg, you give them a kiss on the cheek, and they're gone. And they forget about it. As if nothing ever happened. But your teen needs more love than a little child does. Because they can't get rid of it. You show them love and they walk away and they appreciate your love, but they're still struggling because of the hormonal changes and the changes in society that they need to deal with. They need to come to grips with themselves. They need a lot of love. A lot of love in words and appreciation and in actions, right? And that's not always going to be easy because sometimes you wish you can kick them in the butt. You know, sometimes they're very difficult, right? And sometimes their mouth, whoa, you know, or the actions, you know, and you just need to hold your tongue and just show them love. Sure, you need to correct them when they do say wrong things or do wrong things, but do it in love. Show that you love them and that you are concerned, right? But do it out of Christian love, not out of, sometimes you need to just keep your mouth shut and calm down before you talk to them, right? The discipline is that way too, right? If you are upset with your child, sometimes you need to tell the child, just go to your room, I'll come talk to you later. You need to come calm down first and pray. You've got the right heart to deal with the situation. And sometimes for teenagers particularly, sometimes, they can get under your skin, right? Just calm down and be prepared, right? And just calm down and pray that you can get the right words, that you can show Christian love to the teenager. And it's going to mean a lot to them. Thirdly, open communication. You know, done a lot of counseling in my life, and I can tell you 99.9% of the problem is communication. Okay? If people communicate, you have a lot less problems. Husband and wife sometimes don't communicate and that cause marriage issues. You know, parents and their children don't communicate and cause issues, right? Communication is so important. Have an open communication with your child. with your teenager. And what does that mean? Does that mean talking all the time? No, it means, first of all, this. Listen. Just be quiet. Listen. Okay? Have an open ear for them. Be an attentive listener. Okay? Okay? And then pick and choose the exchanges you want with them. Not all things that they're talking about is worth all this. Make a big issue with, right? Pick and choose. Think of which hill you want to die on, so to speak, right? What are the important biblical principles, right? That you do need to address. You can't let it slip, right? And there are things that say, okay, well, you need to deal with matters that are of eternal importance, also for the child, right? There are things that are momentary. Just let it slide. It's not a big deal. Yeah, there are seasons. The people, kids tend to have fads. We had a time where there's earrings or tattoos. We've had the struggle of our kids too. And it says, do we deal with them? Is it a big issue? The more you make an issue, the more it becomes an issue. Sometimes you just have to say, this is a fad. They just want to kick against the grain a little bit. They want to show that they don't have to listen to mom and dad. They can decide for themselves. Okay, just lay the principle down. This is what we did that to our children. Said, this is what we think of it, and we leave it. They know our thoughts of it. They know we're not happy with it. And before you know it, it's not an issue, right? So think about what hill you want to die on. When it comes to immorality, of having, free sex or something, that's obviously a no-no, right? And we won't just let that one go, right? That's what we value. Okay, so be slow to speak and quick to listen. Avoid mind reading. Sometimes marriage issues comes that way too, right? Where husband thinks that he understood what the wife said, right? I've had some situations in marriages too where the husband is talking and the wife is talking, and all of a sudden the wife says, "You never said that to me." And I said, they weren't communicating. He was mind reading. He thought this is what his wife meant, what his wife said, right? So be careful that you're mind reading your teenage children. If you think you understood what they said, just repeat to them what they said to you. And you'll understand if you've understood them correctly, right? Say, is this what you said, right? But don't mind read, and don't interpret. We are very quick to interpret. He said this, but he must mean that. And be very careful with that, because you can go quite wrong on that. Another thing is, be careful to be a problem solver. Your children doesn't always want you to solve their problems. They want some direction. They don't want you to solve the problems. They want to solve themselves. They want to become adults, right? So they're struggling with becoming an adult. So don't be a fixer. We men tend to have that problem. We want to fix things, right? We can fix everything, right? So we want to fix the problem with children. Don't do that. Just lay down the guidelines, right? How they might go about it, and just leave it. I found the best results. Some of my kids too. I says, I just can't get through to them. I said, okay. I talked to one of my sons. I said, he just doesn't listen to me. He says, he's a hard head, right? And so I said, look, Jason, this is the way it is. Because you need to decide now. And the following day, he does exactly what I said. I said, whoa, where did this come from? Because I left the decision in his own court, right? But sometimes they're challenging you, not so much for you to make the decision, but to get some direction from you. But they're not asking for it. They're just going about it in a very strange way. But that's the way they do. That's the way they go about it, right? So just give them the biblical principles, how you might have done it, what you might expect from them, and just leave it with them. You can pray with them, but leave it. Let them make the decision. They need to make that decision. Be patient, right, for that response. It may not come right away either. Right? We sometimes want to see quick change. Okay, another thing is focus on their strengths. Don't get fixated on their lacks. Sometimes we parents we expect something from our children. We don't let the children be themselves. We want them to be this and this and this. Right? We just need to let their children grow, right, and be themselves. You may want your child to be a doctor, but maybe your child is not cut out to be a doctor. So don't force them in that direction, right? You need to evaluate your child. Each child is going to be different. Everyone has strengths and weaknesses. One has more leads this way, one more leads that way. Look at his strengths commend them on the strengths, encourage them on the strengths, okay? Show appreciation, even if it's in a field that you're not too interested in. Show appreciation, encourage them, give plenty of loving care. Most important is that focus more on Christian attitude than on excelling. Right? But sometimes we want our children to do well. Of course we want them to do well. But let that not to be at the cost of Christian attitude. It's more important to instill a Christian attitude in your child than that they do well in a particular job. They're not all going to do well. We have some children who are very gifted, other children are not very gifted. It doesn't matter. Right? It's Christian attitude is number one. Okay, next one, be accepting and non-judgmental. Now, teens can be very hard on themselves, okay? And they're really self-evaluating, okay? They want mom and dad to be proud of them, right? And so keep asking themselves, are mom and dad proud of me? Okay? Do I fit in with the peers? Okay? Am I comfortable with my changing of my body? Okay? Do I fit in? These are all questions that teens are constantly asking themselves. Okay? And so we need to be careful that we don't overreact, okay? That we don't lose control. Okay? We may never give our teens an idea that they're a lost cause, right? That they don't fulfill our expectation. Even if they don't fulfill our expectation, never give them that sense. They need to grow on who they are. They need to be loved for who they are. You need to make your home a Christian hospitality, a safe haven where they can fall back to. Be sensitive to their needs and their fears and opinions. Make your family a positive place for them to come back to. Teens need a lot of love. You know, and we talked about mood swings. Tell your teens, that's okay. That's to be expected. You're going through a lot of changes. We are sometimes going through changes, right? And how are we doing handling mood swings, changes in our lives, right? And there here again, you said the example, a role model, especially fathers, right? When there's stress and you lose a job, how are you going to deal with it? Are you going to go to drinking, right? How are you going to handle it? Or are you going to go before the Lord in prayer and speak about it as family and ask the Lord to give you direction, give you peace, and where to go from here, right? Well, how you handle stress is going to affect very much how your children are going to handle stress, right? Show interest, all right? Spend quality time together, okay? And what I mean by showing interest is not, and quality time is not just being there, right? It's important to be there, but that you spend authentic time with them. That means showing interest in their lives. Be as a friend. We need to look at our teens, our young adults, as adults, even if they're not always acting like adults, right? We don't talk to them as that's a switch sometimes parents have difficulty with. They're always their children. At a certain point, they're adults, right? And the sooner you can accept them as adults, the easier it's for them also to relate to you. I sometimes thinking about what is my relationship to my sons? You know, they're my sons, but when I'm with them, I don't really feel that they're my sons. I feel like they're my brother, right? And because this is how we relate. We get along very well, right? And yet yet at certain moments when the way you speak to me, I say, oh yes, I guess I am their father, you know. But this is because I deal with them as adults, and because you deal with them as adults, they also can relate better to you too. But if they have a sense that you still think they're a child, they're kicking against you, right? And they're going to give you a hard time. The sooner you can deal with a teenager and a young adult as an adult, even if you don't feel they're qualified for those terms yet, right, the easier they will be able to deal with you too. And so you need to respect, you need to be involved with their interests, ask who their friends are, and talk about it, and you know, how their day was, right? But also respect privacy. Right? You just can't walk into the bedrooms without knocking on the door, those kind of things. Right? They're adults. Another, what's very helpful at times is not only let them ask you for advice, or Dad, what do you think of this? Also, reverse that. Son, what do you think of this? I need to make this decision. What would you do? Well, he's pretty young, he just may not really know what to do. But, involve them in family discussions. It also helps them to feel part of it and feel grown up. Okay, so this is some of the ways that we as parents can deal with our children. But I also want to lay out some biblical principles. Number one, always pray for your children. Because ultimately it's not what we do, it's what the Lord's going to do through what we teach and lay in the hearts of the children. Right? We're just sowing the seed. Just as we preach the word, we only sow the seed, the Lord is fruition. It's also in our family, raising our children. We can only sow the seed in the hearts of our children. The Lord is the one who needs to give fruition. So always pray. And parents tend to pray for the little ones in mother's womb yet. Pray for them when they're giving birth, and pray for them when they're little yet. Pray when they're teenagers too. And when you finish with a teenager, you'll pray for your grandchildren as well, because the society is pretty brutal, and Satan is pretty strong. Right? So continue to pray for your children and your grandchildren. Secondly, don't preach. Be very conscious of that. Right? Don't preach to your children. Right? Lay the moral teachings and quality on the heart and minds of the children, but don't preach to them. Right? Again, you need to hear that, and when you need to lay the moral quality on them, let them hear it's God speaking to them, not you. You're not in a battle. You're not in a battle with them. You're not going to fight with their wills. I says, son, let's look at, he's challenging me, right? And I say, son, look, this is not what I want to do. Read the Bible yourselves. This is what the Bible says. I just need to lay it in your heart. I just need you to think about this. I says, I hope you will in prayer with it, but you need to hear the Lord speaking to you on this. Right? This is our job, right? We can't force our children to be good people, and only the Lord can move them to be good people. We just need to direct them to where they can find it. Okay, thirdly, again, some of these things are going to be a bit repetitive. Don't expect more from them than they are capable. Examine your expectation of your teens. What you expect from your teens, you may have to lay aside, right? Every child is going to be different, right? And so don't expect more from them that they are able to give. Encourage them to do the best they can do, and love and encouragement goes a lot further than critique, right? Avoid comparison, right? Don't say to one child, says, but your brother was like this, but when I was young, I did this. That's not helpful, right? It may be true, it doesn't help, right? It destroys, it damages your relationship. Another one is practice what you preach. Don't say something that you're not doing yourself, right? And if you give a promise, follow it through. Broken promises have hurt so many relationships. If you give a promise, follow it through. And I mean it, it's very, very important for teens. Say, you said this, right? And they'll hold you account. You make a promise, follow through. If you can't hold that promise, explain. Be upfront, be honest with them. They said, I really wanted to do this, but I couldn't do it, and try to maybe make another promise, but follow through, right? And don't just leave it hanging. Just not being fair to them. They don't think you're dealing with them properly. Avoid idols. And sometimes I see this also from people coming from, maybe you struggle with this too, I'm not sure. I see there's some other cultures coming into Canadian culture where they want to make a go of this life. They're coming from a bad situation, maybe refugees, and they come into this culture and they want to make a goal of life, right? And then it becomes, making a goal becomes an idol, right? And they want their children to make sure that they go to university and they get good grades and good jobs and so forth, as if that's the number one thing in life. Be careful of that. The number one thing in life is not having a high-paying job or being a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. The number one thing is that you're godly, right? That you serve the Lord, right? Don't lose the Christian principles. Right? Don't make idols of power, of beauty, of excelling in strength, right? Evaluate yourselves. What's important in your life? Is it important in your life that you're CEO in a job, right? Or is it important you live in your life that you glorify the Lord in this, right? Let the child see that. Let it shine forth, right? Okay, next one, seek good times, right? Seek good times. You know, life is busy. You know, we talked about mom and dad. You know, you can only be as good a parent as you're a husband and wife. And that's not always easy. And in our own circles, in our Canadian Reformed circles, it's a real struggle too, because we have Christian education that is very expensive, right? With the result that mom and dad are both out to work, right? And so it's very difficult to cement a good relationship, right? But where was I going with this? But you need to spend quality time with your children. Have lots of good times with children. Make sure that you have fun times. That you, even if you're busy as husband and wife at different jobs, you need to plan it, because if you don't plan it, it doesn't work, right? You realize you need to have fun time with your kids, but life is busy, man. You know, then you have the church work, and you have your own work, and then you have your own buddies to contend with, the social pressures of other couples and so forth, and you have no time you don't have time for your teens. You need to plan time with your teens. It's good for dad to say, okay, hey son, let's go for a cup of coffee. Okay, let's go fishing for a day, or whatever. Mom says, hey, you know, this or that, right? It's good to plan quality time with your kids. And if you don't plan it, it doesn't happen. I have it in my own life. As pastor, I'm super busy. But if I don't plan it, it doesn't work, because before you know it, your schedule is full, right? But it's those good times, fun times, that are really going to help you when you have difficult times. Your kids will have difficult times. And when we were in Papua, we worked. You know, we were in the bush for 10 years and on the coast for 8 years, and we never traveled much. I was always working. I was a workaholic. That's my weakness. I just keep work, right? And I never spent much time with the kids, you know. And so I said, look, before we leave Indonesia, we're going to have to see something of Indonesia. So we all took a backpack, and for 1 month we went on to Sini, the big boat, and we traveled through Indonesia. It was for a whole month. Well, the kids still have a great memory of that, right? And it cemented our lives together. So when they had difficult times, it helped them to relate to us, and because we got very close. We were just traveling, having fun together. So seek good times, because they will help you when they're difficult times. If you never had a good time with your kids and have a fun time with your kids, when they're difficult, you have difficult times, you have nothing to lean back on. They say, well, dad's always busy anyways, and mom never has time for me, and they're always fighting anyways, so how are you going to solve their problems when they have difficult times, right? But if you spent a lot of time with them, and you had good vacation time with them, and you just didn't do it for yourself, you did it as a family with your kids, they will remember that. Every time we came home at Furley, we always went to the Pioneers together for a couple of weeks with the kids. I tell you, those are moments that pulls us together. Our family now, our kids are unbelievable. You know, they want us to come closer. You know, nowadays there's a lot of our kids. I remember we were in Chatham, and we had young peoples over one Sunday evening, and we told our daughter, says, we're going to go so-and-so, we'll be back in so-and-so this time. And young people says, you mean your parents tell you when they're going to leave, where they're going to go? And our daughter said, yeah, of course. Kids don't tell them. You don't tell your kids that, and the kids don't need to know that in today's society. But we related to each other in such a way that it became very strong bonding, right? And now, we came back from Papua New Guinea, we live in Toronto. The kids say, you're still too far away. You got to come closer. So we're moving now this year closer to Brantford. The kids, because of the good times we've had, the kids want us closer by, not far away, right? It's great. Okay, allow failures. The kids are going to make mistakes. That's okay. They say, that's fine. Home is the best place to have failures. What better place to make a boo-boo than the loving surroundings of home? right? That's where they can learn. But don't be critical of them. You know, we've had children who sometimes say, I hope they don't go to so-and-so's place because they're gonna they're gonna give us a bad name because he's just a rascal in our house, right? And I said, and we're gone for a while and somebody else is taking care of a child and they come back to us and says, you got the nicest kids in the world. I said, what? You know, they're not in your own home, but they are somewhere else. And that's, you know what's happening is that because in the home, that's where they can wrestle with themselves to become adults. And so the worst of them comes out. So just because the worst of themselves, does not mean that they're the worst. Okay? But they're trying to find themselves, and so what they need is not your critique and you're yelling at them. So what they need is simply love. When they're hard on you, love them. You know, that's what they need. You know, they're not being really mean to you. They're just struggling with themselves, right? And so and you realize that when they're out somewhere else, they're actually the nicest kids in the world. Because, meaning you have laid the right principles on their heart, but you don't see it in your own home. And it's because in their home, they're still trying to develop, right? And it comes with a price. We need to just take a step back and realize, you know, they don't mean it. They're struggling. Just love them more, right? Just at the same time, you do have to have rules, right? And parents have made big mistakes in that way too. They say, well, you know, kids, little children need rules. As they get a little bit older, you need to expand those rules a little bit. Get a little more freedom. Be careful. A teenager needs boundaries. You take those boundaries away, they don't know what to do. Yeah? If you say to your child, let's say a teenager, I want you home at 11 o'clock, some parents say, no, I'm not going to do that. They need to grow up. They need to make their own decision. They say, no, if they're not you know, they're still in the house, you may make house rules. You're home at 11 o'clock. And even if they're not, you can deal with it afterwards, but teenagers appreciate boundaries, right? It's unbelievable. You think that they should give them more freedom? They need boundaries. That gives them security. Boundaries give them security. Even if they're going to kick against it, don't worry about it. Okay? You think that they're kicking against it, so maybe you should give a little freedom. No. This is give them the boundaries and give them the reason why. Right? Don't say just do this or else, right? And if you're not home at 11 o'clock or else, don't do it that way. They said, no, I expect you to be home at 11 o'clock. So they come home at 11:15, you know, because they're saying, oh, how's mom and dad going to handle that? I said, that's okay. You know, next time, Kai, come a little earlier, please. Right? You know, so that, again, deal with love. They need boundaries. They feel secure. Okay? They feel protected. Right? Because they're not able to do it themselves yet. If you make rules, be consistent. Don't make a rule that you can't keep. Right? Again, practice what you preach. And be careful you don't have too many rules. Make rules in places that are of importance. And don't make rules that are not necessary. Another very important thing is be able to also admit your own failures. Right? Mom and dad need to be able to say sorry to their children. Some parents find that belittling. They said, I don't have to say sorry to my kids. Right? No. You need to, if you made a mistake, admit it. Say sorry. Ask for forgiveness. Right? You become big in their eyes when you do that, not smaller. Okay? If they hear you saying sorry, they will melt. And they say, Dad, you didn't really have to do that. I understand. Right? And they will much easier say sorry to you too. Right? And ask you for forgiveness. Okay? Another one is be approachable. That means you need to plan time with your children, right? Be approachable not only time-wise, but also character-wise, right? Sometimes we're so busy with our own buddies and job and church and so forth that we're always talking at a high intellectual level, right? That the kids will feel, well, I don't think I can talk to him. He's just way over there, right? Or whatever, right? So make yourself available, approachable both in time and character. Again, be a good listener, hear them out. Make it easy for your teens to approach you. This is important also with difficult topics, awkward topics, as sex. You're not going to find your teenager coming to you quickly. Dad, tell me about sex. They're not going to do that too quickly. And yet they want to. And you need to open the door for them. Right? You need to, at a certain point, realize, hey, maybe I should talk to them about this. Right? And you know, the best way to talk to your children is not face to face. I'm looking at you, you know. Best way to talk to your children is when you're saying side by side. You know, I had one of my youngest son, we were in Chatham, and he was in university in London, and he could come home via rail. He'd phone up, his dad, I'm going to come home. He said, okay, I'll come and pick you up. Why did I go pick him up when he could take a via rail? Because when he was in the car with me, and he was sitting here, and I'm driving away, he would open up his little heart. Because he didn't have to face me. He was facing this way, I was facing this way, and he would open up his little heart, you know. If you want to talk to your daughter, do dishes together. You're facing this way, and you can talk, right? If you're facing each other, it's much harder for them to open up. If you're not facing each other, just, you know, driving or doing dishes or whatever, they open up much easier. Find time where you're just alone with your child, right? I found the best time to have my children open up, you know, show what's inside their hearts is when we're driving, right? And they seem to open up much easier because they're not really, you know, facing me. We're just driving, and we have an hour or two. We have to blow the breeze anyway, so might as well talk, and things come out, right? Be careful with nagging. You know, there's some things that was going to irritate you. We had that with his earrings and tattoos a little bit, and I figure, how often do you say that? You know, and the more you nag on it, the worse it becomes. You know, you may have a child who say, well, we had one too, who all of a sudden he has these bright red basketball shoes. Why do you have to have that? You know, again, which hill do you want to die on? Let's let it go. And don't be nagging, because your child will push your boundaries. They know what you like and what you don't like, and they'll push your boundaries. And don't fall for it. Again, where are the Christian principles, biblical principles? Those are the things you need to deal with. All the other things are less important. It's just a phase. It'll go. The more you make an issue of it, the more it becomes an issue as well. Right? Another one very important. Don't ever put your teens in a position where they have to make a decision between you and their friend. Because chances are you will lose. Right? If your boy is going out with a girl and you say, I don't like this girl, if it's either her or me, don't do that. You just might lose. Right? And that's not the way to handle it. Right? Another thing is maybe once your teen leaves home, they're quite young yet, and maybe because they got involved with things they shouldn't get involved in, sex or drugs or whatever, as always welcome them home. But make the standard clear. You're welcome in the house, but if you're coming with your common law partner, separate bedrooms. If you're coming here, drugs outside. Me and my house will serve the Lord. They need to know your standard well beforehand, right? But keep the door open, because it may be a phase as well, right? And through your love and Christian principles and prayer, the Lord may change their heart as well. But if you close the door, you will never be able to work it. Why do you want to close your door to your children when you're doing evangelism to someone who's out there in the world? Then you should first of all evangelize to your child, right? But you have to do it with proper perspective. All right? Okay, that's a little bit about parenting. Now a little bit about grandparenting. Ooh, I'm running out of time? Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Okay, well let me just give basically just a few points on grandparenting then. Is that today's society, and I realized that when I was in Chatham too, there's so many people want to retire at 50. And why do you want to retire at 50? Because you want to go see the world. And I say, you know, and this is what the world is also trying to press on us too. It says, you know, retire and enjoy life. I said, that is totally wrong, not a biblical principle of grandparenting. You know, if you look at the old people in the Bible, Moses, Joshua, John, Louise, they were older members who were very useful in the church and in the families, right? We just talked about in our group too, is when you retire does not mean finished. It means, you know, I always say, I'm retired, but I'm now rewired. Because now I can do something else. the responsibilities changed, right? But my number one task in life, to fear the Lord, to serve Him, I can even do greater in times of retirement than I could in times before retirement, because then I was very busy, physically busy in order to earn a living, right? Now I don't have to worry about earning a living. Now I can give my full time to serving the Lord in a church, for the family, and etc. Right? And so it doesn't mean you can't travel a little bit, yes, but not at the cost of serving the Lord in the church and your family. Right? The world today seems to say that a lot of grandparents, actually 2 out of 3 families, Christian grandparents, think that their grandchildren don't want them to interfere. That is a false thinking, right? They just want you to be there for emotional support, right? They need to just grow up independently, autonomously. That's not biblical, right? But again, as I said before, you can only be as good a parent as your husband or wife. You can only be as good a grandparent if you are a parent. For if you have a beautiful relationship with your children, that will pass on to the next generation. You will have connection with your grandchildren if you have good connection with your children. So it starts from the very beginning when you had kids, when they were toddlers. That's where it begins. So I'm back to the beginning again, right? You can be a beautiful grandparent if you have done your parenting well too. And there's nothing more beautiful than laying God's teaching and faithfulness on the hearts of your grandchildren to be there. And as grandparents, you don't only have to be there for your children. I think when I see a lot of our retired people in the congregation, they're too busy with things of this world. I really appreciate it when we had one grandparent that has nothing to do with our family spoke to my son, who we were struggling with. That was a big help. So it doesn't have to be for your own children. You can be there for someone else's child that you can connect with, right? You can also, because you're in the good times in your life and you're financially well off, you can sometimes also help a child from a poor family, right? And say, okay, we have a situation too where some of our kids are very musical, but when you have 5 children, it gets very expensive time of life. There's an older brother who says, I will give you some musical training in whether it was piano or whatever, eh? Violin. And says, I'll do it free of charge. I said, wow, that's what pension people can do, because they have very little costs, and the money is coming from the government, from your pension. So you can help in many other ways. And I think that I said too before, retirement is not finished work, it's just new responsibility. And you can fulfill your number one calling is fear the Lord, serve Him in the church and in your family and in the church abroad. Okay, sorry, thank you very much for your time.
I hope this is still in the theme. My question is, you went to Indonesia, right? So you know about the culture or concept of out of the nest for the kids, right? So my question, and then we are here, kind of very different with the like a Western culture. So my question is, what is the best time based on Christian principle? The best time to let it go or to accept our kids' request for out of the nest? That's my question.
Yeah, I think that that varies from family to family and from child to child as well. Yeah, I think it's a hard question to answer because it has to do with a relationship with your kids. Why do you want to go out of the nest? Is it because they're not happy with mom and dad, or because of peer pressure? If they're going to go out of the nest, then it's very hard to say no, because they're going to do it anyways. If they're going to step out, we had one child who wanted to leave. I says, okay, if you want to leave, okay. Because what you want to keep is open communication. And if you're going to say no to them, they're going to do it anyways. Or you're going to have a hard time because you say no, right? So you're not helping by not yielding, but say, okay, but set the parameters, right? That you can be part of their life. And so you can still help them in the growth and growing, right? So at what age? It's hard to tell. One child is different from the next child. And what's the cause? What is bringing this on? If it's a negative thing, if it's getting involved with for peers who are off track, you really have to discourage that, of course. Again, you may not be able to stop it. So you just try to be part of their life, right? And be involved in them, and hopefully that can work out better. Does that help you a little bit?
I mean, like, what do you call it? Has to be one in the first of it said in Bible, I mean, right? It's on Christian something because I read it. Somebody has said the man should leave his parents, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the connection with marriage.
Oh, it doesn't connecting with the out of the necessary.
No, that text you're talking about from Genesis. That's when man shall leave his father and mother and join his wife and become one flesh. Right? That's So I don't think the Bible particularly talks about God in the next as such. It doesn't in the marriage context, and that's a good context to do it. That's a good time to leave mom and dad when you are connecting with your wife or your future spouse, of course. But I think RMS, again, it's the reason why. And just be there. Don't kick against it, because they're going to do it anyways, sooner or later. So just try to be part of their life and communicate so you can keep the door open for growth in the Lord. All right? Okay. Yeah. Yes.
Pastor Henry katakan berdasarkan Efesus, main responsibility untuk parenting adalah fathers.
Sorry?
Main responsibility in parenting is fathers.
Yes.
Ibu membantu,
Yeah.
gitu ya. Can you elaborate that and give example? Because we know that some of the mothers is more dominant in the house, and children also sometimes more happy to learn from the mothers. What items that the father has to teach the children?
Yeah, this could be a cultural thing as well. I realize that, but I think biblically, from biblical perspective, God gave the husband to be the authority of the house, the head of the house. And so father and mother need to raise the children together. That's obvious. But you could say father's ultimately responsible. They have to answer the Lord on how the family goes. The fathers, they can delegate some of their authority to their wives because they're not able to be with the children 24/7, whereas the wives can be, right? But what goes on during the time the father's out at work, the wife can speak to her husband about it afterwards and seek direction. The wife will never do something outside of the husband's knowledge or direction, right? They need to be one on this, right? Okay? So obviously a normal situation where the wife is home raising the children and dad is at work and so forth, in that sense the children will be more influenced by the wife, but the wife's influence will not be outside of the husband's knowledge or direction. Does that make sense? Sorry.
Hi, Pastor Hendrik. Thank you so much for presenting to us about the parenting the teenagers. So I have a 7 and a 10-year-old, 2 boys. And during this retreat where we're talking about God's faithfulness to all generations, we've been, discussing about how really at the end of the day it starts with us, and we need to evaluate how we think, how we set the patterns in our family, and reevaluating our emotions and everything in order to pass on that God's faithfulness to the next generation. And I've just been thinking that, along with the good things that we're trying to pass on, sometimes it also comes along with the bad, maybe from past family patterns and things like that. So do you have any recommendations or examples of how do we work through that as we're trying to pass on God's faithfulness to our children? When do we start to share with them about the past items that we're still working through? Is it once we've kind of settled it, or along the way? And how should we try to recognize within ourselves when, something like you need to change that, and you know what I mean? So that.
Okay. Yeah. No, you make a good point, because we don't want to just show our children that we are really good, and that they're the only ones that are struggling. We don't have any struggles. Just like I said too, it says, if you make a mistake, admit it, seek forgiveness, ask forgiveness for your children, right? Then I think it's also good for you to talk at a certain point to talk to your children and says, I realize I haven't always been the best parent. We've made mistakes too, and children are also very accepting of that. When you open your own heart to them, but again, age appropriate, and that again, there's no fixed rule. Maybe one at 13, another at 16. It depends on the maturity of your child. Girls tend to be quicker and mature on these matters than boys do, right? And you don't always have to say everything either. You don't have to burden your children with problems of the past that's not going to affect them in the future anyways, right? So be wise in these things. But if there are certain things you realize that, my child knows something of my past, that we heard it from so and so, then talk to him. Yeah, let them hear from you, not from someone else, right? But they also realize that you're struggling too. You're just like them, sinners who are redeemed sinners, and you are trying to live as faithfully as possible before the Lord. They can appreciate that too. All right. Thank you.
I found, as a mother of 3 young adults, I found that in a certain phase of one of our children's life, they experience a spiritual numbness. I want to know, in your opinion, what is this, and then why this happened?
Yeah, and we notice that too. Sometimes our children, one is different from the other. A couple of our children are very spiritually alive, and others we wish they were more alive. Right? And what in our experience is that sometimes they tend to be materialistic, and I think it's because when we came from Indonesia, where we had very little, we needed very little. All of a sudden, you come to decide, whoa, there's just so much, and some deal with it better than others, right? And so materialism can be one of the things. There are certain idols in their lives that they're struggling with, and then spiritual matters fall by the wayside. I think the best way to deal with, again, is pray for your children and encourage your children to pray and to be close to Scripture, right? And because, where was I? I think just yesterday we were talking to a group. Yeah, we were in the Bible study yesterday after church, and we talked about, if just imagine yourself. We're busy with Scripture all the time, so the Spirit is working through Scripture, right? We believe that the Spirit works, doesn't just fall out of heaven, it works through Scripture, right? So because we're busy with Scripture, we are lifted up all the time and we're able to stand reasonably strong, right? But just imagine yourself putting a Bible aside, going to a place where there's no other Christians around, and you're not even doing devotions. What's going to be left of you? You're going to go down. Because the devil's out there attacking you. And if you're not going to feed yourself with Scripture, and if you're not allowing the Spirit to work through you through Scripture, you will go down, right? And so the best thing that we do for our children is to encourage them. Please go to Bible study, continue to attend church. We'll pray for you, and some of these things will become limited too because they're having a spiritual low, right? And pray that the Lord will improve it, and it may not. And we need to be, that's a hard reality sometimes, right? And it may just be a phase in their life. One of our children was just a phase, and because he was so focused on girlfriends, and it didn't matter to him who, right? And once he got through to it and happily married, it was okay again, right? So it can be a phase too. So don't overreact either as if it's a lost case. Just be there, show love, compassion, pray, right? Give good direction.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Pastor Henrik, I just want to follow up
Mungkin
with.
ini pertanyaan terakhir barangkali ya, karena kita udah telat 15 menit.
Yeah, sorry.
Pak Hendrik masih ada sama kita sampai makan siang, jadi suruh-suruh bisa ngobrol nanya.
Just want to follow up with Monty's earlier question about who take the role in bringing up the children, right?
Yeah.
You earlier mentioned that we as a man, as a father, have a leadership.
Yeah.
But I guess the role of the wife also, they have a big role also, if in my opinion, I'm not sure, because men and women learn differently and wired differently, right? And whatever we cannot capture, they can capture the whole emotional aspect and everything. So that way, they are just complementary and equipped more for both of us to grow, to take role on, I guess, more or less like we can say portion wise, more or less the same, right?
Yeah.
Although, of course, in a matter of certain things that man takes the leadership of it. But is that correct?
Yes. You know, I hope I don't know, you maybe are giving you the wrong impression as if the wife is not a big part of her child rearing, not at all. In some ways, the wife has much more influence on the child than the father does. Because of her gentleness, her nature, showing more compassion than men do, right, can have a greater influence on the child. And that's beautiful, right? And husband and wives are different. Right? We're made different, and we have different strengths. So you need to do this together, right? So I'm not taking anything away from the role of the wife. It's just that, why is this text saying fathers? And you go to Timothy, it also speaks about the father, right? And ultimately because the Lord says, God made man first, and then his wife, right? And Adam was also to instruct his wife, right? And so ultimately, when it comes to judgment, if something goes wrong with your children, you're not going to blame your wife for it. You're going to get the blame for it, right? Because you are head of the household. If your wife is training your children different than you want, there's a problem here, right? You need to be one together in this, right? I'm not saying the wife and the husband, it's not a matter of either or. It's you need to talk about together how to raise your children, all right? And you need to know what your wife is involved in, and the wife needs to know what's involved in, right? There's a certain unity, but before the Lord, the final authority lays with the husband, because the husband, the father is head of the household. That's what Scripture tells us, right? So, and not diminishing the role of the wife, very important role. I don't take anything away from her. And she may be even give a lot more into the raising of children than the father. That's possible, right? But it's not outside of the father, because the father is ultimately responsible to answer to the Lord. The wife too, but the father primary. That's a biblical principle. Okay? Thank you. Sorry.